Wealthy man tests cleaner's honesty with an open safe, but what she did made him cry. Richard Thompson held his coffee cup with trembling hands as he watched from his office security monitor. The new employee would arrive any moment for her first cleaning shift, and he had deliberately left the safe wide open with stacks of money in plain sight. Sarah Miller paused at the office door, took a deep breath, and entered with her cleaning cart. Her eyes widened at the sight of the open safe filled with bills, but instead of approaching it, she averted her gaze and began cleaning the desk on the other side of the room. Richard leaned forward in the leather chair of his bedroom, where he watched everything through the cameras he'd installed the week before. At 45, he had inherited one of Chicago's largest construction companies, but he'd also inherited the distrust his father had cultivated for decades. "This one will be just like the others," he muttered to himself, remembering the 3 previous cleaners who had been fired for theft in the last 6 months. Sarah cleaned each piece of furniture with meticulous care, her calloused hands holding the cloth gently. She was 28, with dark hair tied in a low bun, wearing a light blue uniform with white trim that her sister had sewn for her the night before. When she neared the safe to clean the shelf beside it, she hesitated for a moment. Richard held his breath. Sarah looked around, made sure she was alone, and then did something that left the businessman completely stunned. She approached the safe and carefully closed the steel door. After that, she continued cleaning as if nothing had happened. Richard blinked several times, disbelieving. In over 20 years of testing employees, no one had ever closed the safe. Everyone tried to take something, even if just a small bill. 2 hours later, when Sarah finished cleaning the entire floor, she lightly knocked on Richard's bedroom door. "Mr. Thompson, I've finished cleaning. Could you check if everything's all right?" Richard came downstairs and found Sarah waiting with her hands clasped in front of her. "How did you know I was home?" he asked, still processing what he'd witnessed. "I heard the TV upstairs, sir, and, well, you left the safe open in the office. I closed it to avoid temptation for others who might come in." The simplicity of her answer hit Richard like a punch to the gut. She hadn't closed the safe for herself, but to protect others from temptation. "Others?" "Yes, sir. Delivery people, technicians, visitors. Money in plain sight can be a strong temptation for those in need." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Sarah spoke about temptation as if she knew it firsthand. "May I ask you a question, Sarah?" Richard hesitated before continuing. "Didn't you feel tempted to take even a single bill?" Sarah lowered her eyes, and for a moment, Richard thought he'd offended her. But when she looked up again, her eyes shone with unshed tears. "Mr. Thompson, my mother always told me that stolen money doesn't bring happiness. That no matter how much we need it, some things just can't be done. I really need money, I won't lie to you, but I need a peaceful night's sleep even more." "What do you need money for?" Sarah hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak. "My daughter's in the hospital, sir. She's 8 and has a kidney infection that won't heal. The treatment at the public hospital is taking too long, and the private doctor said if she doesn't start the new medication soon..." Her voice faltered, and Richard felt as though someone had squeezed his heart tightly. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because it's not your concern, Mr. Thompson. You hired me to clean your house, not to solve my personal problems." Richard fell silent for a moment. This woman's daughter was sick. She desperately needed money. She had found a fortune within reach, and yet she hadn't taken a single thing. "How much does your daughter's treatment cost?" "Mr. Thompson, please, you don't need to worry about this. I'll figure it out. I always do." "Sarah, I asked how much it costs." She took a deep breath. $20,000, sir. That's for the tests and medication for the next 3 months. Richard did a quick calculation in his head. There had been at least $70,000 in the safe she had closed without touching. "Come back tomorrow at the same time, and Sarah..." "Yes, sir. Thank you for closing my safe." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the difference between Sarah and the other employees. It wasn't just about honesty. It was something deeper. It was about character, about values that couldn't be bought or sold. The next morning, he waited for Sarah to arrive and got straight to the point. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, I left the safe open on purpose. It was a test. Sarah's face paled. A test, sir? Yes. I wanted to see if you would steal anything. Sarah was silent for a long moment, and Richard saw pain spread across her face. You don't trust me, she finally said, her voice barely audible. I didn't, Richard corrected. But now I trust you more than I trust myself. Why? Because you did something I would never do in your place. With my daughter sick, if I found money lying around, I think I'd take it without a second thought. Sarah stared at him in surprise. Do you have children, Mr. Thompson? No, I never married, never had a real family. Then you don't know what it's like to love someone more than yourself. Sarah's words struck Richard like a revelation. She was right. He had never loved anyone more than himself. Sarah, I want to help with your daughter's treatment. No, Mr. Thompson, I won't accept charity. It's not charity. It's an advance on your salary. An advance of $20,000. Mr. Thompson, I make $1,500 a month. It would take over a year to pay that back. Then work for me for a year and a half. Besides cleaning, you can help me with other things. Sarah studied him carefully. Why do you want to help me? Richard thought before answering. Because you taught me something yesterday. You taught me there are still good people in the world, and I want to be one of them too. Sarah began to cry silently. My daughter. Will she be okay? We'll do everything we can, Sarah, everything we can. 3 days later, Richard accompanied Sarah to the private hospital where her daughter would be transferred. The girl's name was Emma Grace, with curly hair like her mother's and a shy smile that melted Richard's heart the first time he saw her. Mommy, who is this man? Emma Grace asked curiously. He's my boss, sweetheart. Mr. Richard. Is he going to help you make me better? Sarah looked at Richard, who knelt beside the hospital bed. I'll do everything I can, Emma Grace. Your mother is a very special woman, and daughters of special women deserve to get better fast. The girl smiled, and Richard felt something he had never felt before. It was as if his heart were expanding inside his chest. In the following days, Richard discovered that Sarah lived in a small house in the South Side neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, with her daughter and her 70-year-old mother, Mrs. Margaret. The house had only 2 rooms and a tiny bathroom, but it was always clean and tidy. Mr. Thompson, you didn't have to come all the way here, Sarah said when Richard showed up at her door with medicine for Emma Grace. I wanted to see where you live, and I wanted to talk to your mother. Mrs. Margaret welcomed Richard with the courtesy typical of her generation, offering coffee and homemade cookies. My daughter told me you're helping with Emma Grace's treatment, the older woman said. May God bless you for that. Actually, Mrs. Margaret, it's your daughter who's helping me. She taught me something very important. What was that? She taught me that honesty can't be bought, and that there are things more valuable than money. Mrs. Margaret smiled. I raised Sarah that way. I always told her that no matter how hard life got, she should never lose her dignity. You succeeded, Richard said. She's the most honorable person I know. Over the next few weeks, Richard began following Emma Grace's treatment closely. He took the girl to her appointments, waited in the lobby during her checkups, and slowly realized he had found something he'd been searching for without even knowing it, a family. Sarah, in turn, began working not just as a cleaner, but as a sort of manager for Richard's home. She organized his schedule, handled his correspondence, and gradually became indispensable. Sarah, can I ask you a personal question? Richard said one afternoon as they waited for Emma Grace to finish a physical therapy session. Of course, Mr. Thompson. Where is Emma Grace's father? Sarah was silent for a moment. He left when he found out I was pregnant, said he wasn't ready to be a father. Do you still talk to him? No, I never saw him again. Emma Grace sometimes asks about him, but I always tell her she doesn't need a father because she has a family that loves her very much. Richard felt a pang of anger toward the man who had abandoned Sarah and Emma Grace. He doesn't know what he lost, he finally said. Maybe it's better this way, Mr. Thompson. Emma Grace has a good life even without him. She has her grandma, she has me, and now she has you too. The words struck Richard deeply. Emma Grace considered him part of the family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. After 2 months of treatment, Emma Grace was practically healed. The doctors were amazed by how quickly she recovered, and Richard found himself thinking that perhaps the love and attention the girl had received had contributed to her improvement. "Mr. Richard," Emma Grace said during one of her last appointments, "will you still be my friend even after I'm all better?" "Forever, Emma Grace. Forever." "And will you keep helping my mom?" Richard looked at Sarah, who was listening with teary eyes. "Your mom doesn't need help, Emma Grace. She's the strongest person I know. But I need her help." "For what?" "To learn how to be a better person." That night, Richard made a decision that would change his life forever. He called Sarah into his office and got straight to the point. "Sarah, I have a proposal for you." "Yes, Mr. Thompson? I want you to come work with me at the company, not as a cleaner, but as my personal assistant." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Mr. Thompson, I don't have the education for that. I only finished high school. And I have 2 college degrees and I still can't trust the people around me." "You have something you can't learn in college: character." "But Mr. Thompson, the salary would be $6,000 a month. You'd have health insurance for yourself, Emma Grace and Mrs. Margaret, and you could still study if you wanted. I'd pay for your college." Sarah stayed silent for a long time. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Richard took a deep breath before answering. "Because when you closed my safe that first day, you didn't just protect my money. You showed me there's still kindness in the world, and that's worth far more than any amount that was in that safe." Sarah began to cry. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know how to thank you." "You already have, Sarah. Every day you work here with honesty, every smile from Emma Grace, every time Mrs. Margaret calls me son, you 3 have completely changed my life." 6 months later, Sarah was working in Richard's office, learning about administration and surprising everyone with her organizational skills and ease with people. Emma Grace was fully recovered and attending a private school near the new house Richard had helped the family buy. "Mr. Richard," Emma Grace said one afternoon when he visited them at their new home, "can I call you Dad?" Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. "Emma Grace, I'd be honored if you called me Dad. So you're my dad now?" Richard looked at Sarah, who was watching from the kitchen doorway. "If your mother allows it, yes." "Mom?" Emma Grace called. "Can I call Mr. Richard Dad?" Sarah walked over slowly. "Honey, Mr. Richard has been part of our family for a long time. If you want to call him Dad, you can." Richard knelt and hugged Emma Grace tightly. "I love you, my daughter." "I love you too, Dad." 2 years passed. Richard had promoted Sarah to administrative manager of the company. She had started night classes in business administration, and Emma Grace was growing into a happy, healthy girl. One Monday morning, Richard arrived at the office and found an envelope on his desk. He immediately recognized Sarah's handwriting. "Mr. Richard, 3 years ago, when you left your safe open that first time, you were testing my honesty. Today, I need to test yours. Yesterday, I discovered the company is facing financial difficulties. I know you didn't want to worry me, but I'm your assistant. It's my job to worry. I also know you used much of your personal savings to pay for Emma Grace's treatment and to help us all these years. I know because I found the bank statements while organizing your documents. Mr. Richard, I want to return all the money you spent on us. I have $70,000 in savings from my salary over these 2 years. I know it's not everything, but it's a start. Please accept it. Just as you taught me there are good people in the world, let me show you that gratitude and loyalty still exist. With love, Sarah." Richard finished the letter with tears in his eyes. Sarah had discovered his financial troubles and wanted to help, even if it meant giving back all her savings. He rushed out of the office and went straight to Sarah's house. He found her making breakfast for Emma Grace before school. "Sarah, we need to talk." "Mr. Richard, what's wrong? I read your letter, and the answer is no." "But Mr. Richard, let me finish. The answer is no because you owe me nothing. Everything I did for you and Emma Grace, I did because you gave me something money can't buy: a family." But the company will recover. It always has. And even if it didn't, I'd rather lose all my money than lose you. Sarah began to cry. You don't understand. I need to do this. I need to know I can repay what you've done for us. Richard hugged her. Sarah, you've already repaid everything. You taught me how to love. You taught me how to trust. You gave me a daughter. Do you think there's any payment in the world for that? At that moment, Emma Grace came running down the stairs. Dad, did you come to have breakfast with us? Yes, my dear. And I'll keep coming every day for the rest of my life. Emma Grace jumped into Richard's arms, and Sarah joined the embrace. Mrs. Margaret appeared in the kitchen and smiled at the scene. My family, Richard murmured. My complete family. 3 years later, Richard proposed to Sarah in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church where she had grown up. Emma Grace was the flower girl. Mrs. Margaret cried with emotion, and the whole community gathered to celebrate the union of two people who had found each other through honesty and love. You know, Sarah, Richard said on their wedding night as they danced at the small party they'd organized in their backyard, I always thought wealth meant having a lot of money in the bank. And now? Now I know wealth is having people who love us for who we are, not what we have. And people we can trust, Sarah added. And people we can trust, Richard agreed. Without having to test their honesty, they laughed together, remembering the day it all began with an open safe and a decision that changed 2 lives forever. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 5 years had passed since the wedding. Richard and Sarah had turned the family business into one of the most respected in Chicago, known not just for the quality of its services, but for the fair treatment of its employees. Emma Grace was now 15, a bright teenager who dreamed of becoming a doctor, inspired by her own childhood experience. One Monday morning, Richard received a phone call that would change the course of their lives again. Mr. Thompson, this is the Department of Child Services. We have a case here that might interest you. How so? An 8-year-old boy was abandoned by his parents in a square near your business. He says he knows you and that you're a good person who helps children. Richard was confused. I don't know any 8-year-old boy. He said you helped his employee's daughter, someone named Emma Grace. Richard's heart raced. Can you give me more details? The boy's name is Tyler James. His parents are struggling with addiction and can no longer care for him. He said he heard his grandmother tell the story of the girl who got better because a kind businessman helped her family. Richard hung up and immediately went to talk to Sarah. Sir, we need to go to the station now. What happened? Richard told her about the call and Sarah didn't hesitate for a second. Let's go get that boy. Are you sure? Adopting a child is a very serious decision. Richard, remember what you told me the day you proposed? I said a lot of things. You said our family was complete, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was waiting for one more. An hour later, they were at the station, meeting Tyler James. He was a thin boy with messy brown hair and big sad eyes. When he saw Richard, he hid behind the social worker. Tyler James, the social worker said gently, this is Mr. Thompson, the man you wanted to meet. The boy looked at Richard curiously. Are you really Emma Grace's dad? Richard knelt to be at the boy's level. Yes, I am. I'm her father in my heart, just as she's my daughter in hers. My grandma said you're a good man, that you help people. I try to be, Tyler James. And you? Are you a good boy? Tyler James nodded shyly. I take care of my little brothers when my mom can't. I make food for them and tell them bedtime stories. Richard felt a tightening in his chest. This 8-year-old boy had already taken on responsibilities some adults couldn't handle. Tyler James, would you like to live with us for a while? Really, I can? Yes. You can meet Emma Grace and Grandma Margaret. You can have your own room and go to a good school. And I'll have a real family. Richard looked at Sarah, whose eyes were filled with tears. You'll have a real family, Tyler James. A family that will love you very much. The adoption process took a few months, but Tyler James moved in with them right away. Emma Grace welcomed her little brother with the warmth of someone raised in a loving family. Mrs. Margaret, now 75, had a new grandson to spoil. "Ty," Emma Grace said one evening as they did homework together, "do you know our family is special?" "Why?" "Because we chose each other. Dad Richard chose Mom, Mom chose him, they chose me, and now they chose you too. And you really chose me for real. For real. And you know what's best? We'll keep choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives." 2 years later, Tyler James had fully adapted to his new life. He was a bright, affectionate boy who had blossomed with the love and stability he found in the Thompson family. Emma Grace was in her senior year of high school, already accepted into medical school, and Tyler James dreamed of becoming a teacher. "Dad," Emma Grace said one afternoon as they gathered for Sunday lunch, "I want to talk to you all about something." "Go ahead, sweetheart," Richard said. "I was thinking, our family started with a test of honesty, didn't it?" "It did," Sarah confirmed. "What if we started a foundation to help other families? We could call it the Integrity Foundation." Richard and Sarah exchanged surprised glances. "How would it work?" Richard asked. "We could help sick kids like I was, families who need work like ours did, and abandoned children like Tyler James." Tyler James lit up at the idea. "And we could teach people that honesty matters, that it's worth being honest even when it's hard." Mrs. Margaret, who had listened quietly, smiled. "My grandchildren are right. You've received so much love and blessings. Now it's time to share that with others." Richard felt deep emotion wash over him. "You know what?" he said. "I think that's the best idea you've ever had." 6 months later, the Integrity Foundation was up and running in the old warehouse of Richard's company, renovated to support vulnerable families. Sarah coordinated social programs, Emma Grace tutored kids from the community in her free time, and Tyler James helped with the younger children. Richard had discovered that using his wealth to help others was infinitely more rewarding than just accumulating money in the bank. "Sa," he said one night as they organized documents for new beneficiaries, "do you remember the day you closed my safe?" "Like it was yesterday," she replied, smiling. "If you'd known then that one simple act would change so many lives, would you have done anything differently?" Sarah thought for a moment. "No, Richard, I'd do the exact same thing. Because at that moment, I wasn't thinking about changing lives. I was just doing what I thought was right. And that's why I love you so much," said Richard, kissing his wife's forehead. "You always do what's right, even when no one is watching." 3 years later, the Integrity Foundation had become a reference in Chicago. They had already helped over 700 families, offering everything from medical treatment to job training and housing. Emma Grace was in her 3rd year of medical school and already talking about specializing in pediatrics. Tyler James was 13, one of the top students in his school, and had become something of an older brother to all the children who came to the foundation. One Friday afternoon, Richard was in his office when he received an unexpected visitor. It was a man around 35, well-dressed, who introduced himself as Jason Wilson. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you about Sarah Miller." Richard felt a chill in his stomach. "Sarah is my wife." "How can I help you?" "I'm Emma Grace's father." Richard's world collapsed. This man was Emma Grace's biological father, the one who had abandoned Sarah when she was pregnant 15 years ago. "What do you want?" Richard asked, trying to control his anger. "I want to meet my daughter. I want to be part of her life." "Your daughter?" Richard stood up from his chair. "You abandoned that girl before she was even born. You don't have a daughter." "I know I made a mistake, Mr. Thompson, but I've changed now. I'm married, financially stable, and I want to make up for the past." 15 years later, you want to make up for it? Where were you when she was sick? Where were you when she cried asking why she didn't have a father? Where were you when she needed medicine and Sarah couldn't afford it? Jason lowered his head. "I know I can't change the past, but I can try to build a future with her. Emma Grace is 17. If she wants to meet you, that's her decision. But I won't let you hurt my family." "Your family?" "My family," Richard repeated firmly. "Sarah is my wife. Emma Grace and Tyler James are my children. and I'll protect them from anything that might hurt them." That night, Richard told Sarah about Jason's visit. She turned pale when she heard her ex-boyfriend's name. "What does he want?" she asked. "He wants to meet Emma Grace." Sarah sat heavily on the bed. "Emma Grace knows nothing about him. To her, you've always been her father. And I am. But maybe she has the right to know the truth." "Richard, I'm scared. What if she decides she wants a relationship with him? What if she stops seeing us the same way?" Richard hugged his wife. "Sar, our daughter loves us. Nothing and no one can change that. And if she decides to meet her biological father, we'll support her. Because that's what parents do. They support their children even when it hurts." The following Saturday, Richard and Sarah called Emma Grace for a serious talk. "Sweetheart, we need to tell you something important," Sarah began. "Did something happen?" Emma Grace asked, worried. "Your biological father showed up," Richard said bluntly. "He wants to meet you." Emma Grace was silent for a long time. "My biological father," she repeated. "But I thought that he wasn't alive anymore." "No, honey. He left us when you were still in my belly," Sarah explained. "And now he's back, saying he wants to meet you." "Why did he abandon me?" "He said he wasn't ready to be a father," Richard answered. "But that doesn't excuse what he did to both of you." Emma Grace thought for a moment. "Can I choose whether I want to meet him or not?" "Of course, sweetheart. The decision is completely yours," Sarah said. "And if I choose to meet him, will you be upset with me?" Richard held his daughter's hands. "Emma Grace, you are my daughter. No matter what happens, that will never change. If you want to meet your biological father, we will support your decision. But I want you both to know something," said Emma Grace, her eyes filled with tears. "To me, you have always been and always will be my father, Dad Richard. Nothing and no one can change that." Richard couldn't hold back his tears. "Thank you, my daughter. Thank you for letting me be your father." A week later, Emma Grace decided she wanted to meet Jason. The meeting was arranged at the family home, with Richard and Sarah present. Jason arrived nervous, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a gift for Emma Grace. "Hi, Emma Grace," he said, visibly emotional. "You're beautiful. You look so much like your mother." Emma Grace greeted Jason politely, but kept her distance. "Why did you leave?" she asked bluntly. Jason swallowed hard. "Because I was young and stupid. Because I was afraid of responsibility. Because I thought I had time to grow up before becoming a father." "And did you grow up?" "I tried. I got married. I have 2 young children now. I work at a good company. But I've always had an emptiness in my heart knowing I abandoned you and your mother." Emma Grace studied him for a moment. "Do your other children know I exist?" "They do. My wife knows too. In fact, she's the one who encouraged me to reach out to you. And what do you want from me now?" "I want to get to know you. I want to see who you've become. I want, if you'll allow it, to be part of your life in some way." Emma Grace looked at Richard and Sarah, then turned back to Jason. "I'll be very clear with you. I already have a father, the best father in the world. He raised me, taught me, took care of me when I was sick, gave me values, and loves me unconditionally. You can't take that place because it's already filled." Jason nodded, visibly moved. "I understand. But," Emma Grace continued, "if you've really changed, if you truly want to know who I am, I can give you a chance. Not as a father, but as a family friend, maybe." "I'd take anything, Emma Grace, anything. Then you can start by telling me about my half-siblings, and maybe one day I can meet them too." In the following months, Jason visited the family a few times. Emma Grace maintained a polite but distant relationship with him, always making it clear that Richard was and always would be her father. Over time, she even met her half-siblings and grew somewhat fond of them, but there was never any doubt about where her true loyalties lay. "You know, Dad," Emma Grace said to Richard during one of these visits, "meeting Jason only made me more certain of one thing." "What's that?" "That family isn't about blood. It's about love, dedication, presence. It's about being there when someone needs you." "And how did you learn that?" "By watching our family. You're not my biological father, but you're my real father. Tyler James isn't my blood brother, but he's my best friend. Grandma Margaret isn't related to us, but she's the best grandma in the world." Richard hugged his daughter tightly. "And that's why I'm so proud of you, Emma Grace. You understand what truly matters in life." Tyler James, who had been listening from the kitchen, walked over. "Can I say something?" said the boy, now 14. "Of course, Ty," said Emma Grace. "When I was little and lived with my biological parents, I always dreamed of having a real family. A family where people loved and cared for each other. When you adopted me, I thought I was dreaming." "And you weren't," Richard teased. "No, Dad. I was living. For the first time in my life, I was really living." At that moment, Sarah arrived from the foundation with exciting news. "Everyone, you won't believe this. We received an anonymous donation of $700,000 for the foundation." $700,000? Richard was stunned. "Who was it?" "We don't know. The person didn't want to be identified. They just left a note saying they were inspired by our family's story and wanted to help other families find the same happiness." Mrs. Margaret, who was knitting on the couch, smiled. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What, Grandma?" asked Tyler James. "It means your kindness is spreading. It means others are learning that it's worth being good, that it's worth helping." Richard sat down beside Mrs. Margaret. "Mrs. Margaret, when Sarah locked my safe that first day, I thought she was just being honest, but now I realize she was planting a seed." "What kind of seed?" "A seed of kindness, a seed of hope, a seed that grew into a tree now bearing fruit for dozens of families." Sarah sat on the other side of Mrs. Margaret. "You know what's funny? That day I didn't even think twice before locking the safe. To me, it was just the right thing to do." "And it was," said Emma Grace. "And it still is. Every day you keep doing the right thing even when no one's watching." "Especially when no one's watching," added Tyler James. 2 years passed. Emma Grace was in her final year of medical school, interning in pediatrics at the hospital where she'd been treated as a child. Tyler James, now 16, was student council president and already talking about studying social work to help underprivileged kids. The Integrity Foundation had become one of the most respected social organizations in Chicago, and Richard had received numerous awards for his philanthropic work. But to him, the greatest reward was still the love of his family. One Monday morning, exactly 7 years after the day Sarah had first locked the safe, Richard received a phone call that left him completely emotional. "Mr. Thompson, this is the Chicago City office. We'd like to invite you to an honorary ceremony." "What kind of honor?" "You and your family will be honored as Chicago's Family of the Year for the social work done through the Integrity Foundation." Richard hung up and rushed to tell Sarah the news. "Sir, we've been chosen as Family of the Year." "What do you mean?" Richard told her about the call, and Sarah couldn't believe it. "Richard, do you remember when it was just you testing my honesty and me trying to get money to treat our daughter? I remember it like it was yesterday. And now look where we are. Isn't it amazing how one simple decision can change so many lives?" "It wasn't a simple decision, sir. It was the right decision. And right decisions always have the right consequences." On the night of the ceremony, the whole family stood together on the stage of the Chicago Civic Opera House. Richard, Sarah, Emma Grace, Tyler James, and Mrs. Margaret received warm applause from a packed audience. When it was Richard's turn to give the thank you speech, he looked at his family and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, 7 years ago, I was a wealthy but lonely man. I had a lot of money, but I didn't have what truly matters. I didn't have love." The audience listened in silence. "One day, I decided to test the honesty of a new employee. I left my safe open with money in plain sight, thinking she'd steal like all the others. But she did something that changed my life forever. She locked the safe." Richard looked at Sarah, who was crying with emotion. "That woman didn't just lock my safe. She opened my heart. She taught me that there are still good people in the world. She taught me that honesty can't be bought or sold. And he gave me the family I never knew I needed." He pointed to Emma Grace and Tyler James. "These are my 2 greatest treasures. They're not my biological children, but they're my heart's children. And today I know for certain that being a father by heart is far more important than being a father by blood. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Mrs. Margaret, Richard continued, looking at his mother-in-law, thank you for raising the most honest woman I know. Thank you for accepting me as your son. Mrs. Margaret waved from her wheelchair, moved. And Sarah, Richard turned to his wife, thank you for closing my safe that day. But most of all, thank you for opening my heart every day since then. He paused, trying to control his emotions. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're honored as Family of the Year. But I want to tell you that any family can be a Family of the Year. All it takes is love, honesty, and the decision to always do what's right, even when no one is watching. The Integrity Foundation exists to remind people that it's still worth being good, that it's still worth helping, that it's still worth believing the world can be a better place. Richard looked once more at his family, but it exists mainly to remind us that life's greatest treasures aren't in safes. They're in the hearts of the people we love and who love us back. The audience rose in a heartfelt standing ovation that lasted several minutes. After the ceremony, the whole family went to dinner at a simple restaurant in the neighborhood where Sarah had grown up. "Dad," said Emma Grace as they waited for their order, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "If you could go back in time and change one thing, what would it be?" Richard thought for a moment. "You know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Not even my decision to test your mom that first day." "Why?" "Because if I hadn't tested her, I might never have discovered how special she is. Sometimes the mistakes we make lead us exactly where we need to be." Tyler James perked up. "How so, Dad?" "Well, Ty, if my parents hadn't been distrustful people, maybe I wouldn't have become distrustful too. If I hadn't been distrustful, I wouldn't have tested your mom. If I hadn't tested her, we might never have grown close. And if we hadn't grown close, you two would never have become my children." "So sometimes bad things happen so good things can come later?" asked Tyler James. "I believe so, son, but only if we don't give up on being good people along the way." Sarah held her husband's hand across the table. "Richard, do you remember what you told me on our wedding day?" "That I loved you more than anything in life." "No, the other thing." Richard smiled. "That I'd learned wealth isn't about having a lot of money in the bank." "Exactly. And today, 7 years later, do you still feel the same?" Richard looked around the table at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. "Today, I'm even more certain, sir. True wealth is right here at this table. It's in the love we share, the trust we've built, the honesty we practice every day." Emma Grace raised her soda glass. "Then let's make a toast." "To what?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "To honesty, to family, and to closed safes that open hearts." Everyone laughed and toasted together. "And to many more years of happiness," Richard added. "Forever," said Sarah. "Forever," Emma Grace and Tyler James repeated in unison. Mrs. Margaret smiled and murmured softly, "God bless this family. May it always be proof that true love always wins." 10 years had passed since that Monday morning when it all began. Emma Grace was now a respected pediatrician specializing in treating underprivileged children. Tyler James had graduated in social work and was now working as a coordinator for the Integrity Foundation. Richard and Sarah remained married and deeply in love, dedicating their lives to helping other families. Mrs. Margaret, now 85 years old, was still the heart of the family, always ready with wise advice or a warm hug. One Monday morning, exactly 10 years later, Richard was organizing his office when he came across an old photo. It was from the day the Integrity Foundation opened, with the whole family smiling in front of the building that had become a symbol of hope for hundreds of people. Sarah walked into the office and saw her husband gazing fondly at the picture. "What are you remembering?" she asked. "I'm thinking about what my life was like before you came into it, how different I was." "You weren't a bad person, Richard. You were just lost. Lost, and I didn't even know it. I thought I had everything I needed. And now," Richard hugged his wife, "now I know I had nothing that truly mattered. No love, no purpose, no family, just money in a safe. And if someone offered you all the money in the world in exchange for giving up our family?" Richard didn't hesitate. "I'd lock the safe and throw away the key. Just then, Emma Grace and Tyler walked into the office with news that would leave everyone speechless. "Dad, Mom," Emma Grace said, "we have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" Sarah asked. Tyler smiled. "The Integrity Foundation has been chosen to receive the National Social Responsibility Award. It's the highest honor in the country for this field." Richard and Sarah were stunned. "But that's not all," Emma Grace continued. "Along with the award comes a donation of $3 million to expand the foundation's work." $3 million? Sarah couldn't believe it. "And there's more," Tyler added, barely containing his excitement. "The governor wants to meet you. He wants to use our story as an example of how private initiatives can transform the country." Richard sank into his chair. "You know, when I left that safe open 10 years ago, I never imagined it would lead to all this." "That's right, Dad," Emma Grace said. "One small decision, one honest reaction, and look where we are now." "Do you know what this means?" Sarah asked. "What?" the children replied. "It means our responsibility is even greater now. It means we have to keep being examples of honesty and kindness for so many more people." "And we will," Tyler said with conviction, "because honesty isn't just something you show when you're tested. It's something you practice every day, in every decision you make." Richard stood and embraced all three of them. "I love you, more than all the words in the world could ever say." "We love you too, Dad," Emma Grace and Tyler said. "And I love all of you more than my own life," Sarah added. 6 months later, at the National Social Responsibility Award ceremony, Richard took the stage to receive the honor from the governor. Before an audience of over 3,000 people and a live broadcast across the nation, he once again had the chance to tell the story that had changed so many lives. "Honorable Governor, ladies and gentlemen," Richard began. 10 years ago, I was a man who believed money was the same as wealth. Today, I know I was completely wrong." The audience listened intently. "True wealth isn't in our safes, it's in our hearts. It's not in what we accumulate, but in what we share. Not in what we test, but in what we trust." Richard looked at his family in the front row. 10 years ago, my wife Sarah closed a safe I had left open to test her. Today, 10 years later, I can say that was the most important day of my life. Not because I discovered she was honest, but because I discovered I could still learn to be a better person. He paused, visibly moved. The Integrity Foundation was born from the certainty that there are still good people in the world, people who do the right thing even when no one is watching, people who close others' safes and open their own hearts. But it exists mainly to remind us that honesty isn't a test you pass or fail. It's a way of life. It's a choice we make every day in every situation, with every person we meet along the way. Richard looked directly into the cameras. "That's why I want to leave a message for all the families watching us. Don't test each other's honesty. Build trust. Don't close your hearts out of fear of being deceived. Open your hearts and allow yourselves to love and be loved. And most of all, remember that life's greatest treasures don't cost money. They cost love, dedication, presence, honesty. They cost the daily decision to be a good person in a world that sometimes seems to undervalue kindness." The audience rose in an emotional standing ovation that lasted over 5 minutes. After the ceremony, the whole family went home to celebrate. Mrs. Margaret, now frailer but still sharp, was waiting for them with a special dinner. "Grandma, did you watch it on TV?" asked Tyler. "I did, my grandson, and I cried with emotion. You are the pride of my life." Emma Grace knelt beside her grandmother's chair. "Grandma, can you give me some advice?" "Of course, my dear, go ahead." "How do we keep from losing ourselves in all this recognition? How do we stay the same people we've always been?" Mrs. Margaret smiled with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life. "My child, you stay yourselves by doing exactly what you've always done, loving each other, helping those in need, and being honest in every word, every gesture, every decision. But what if fame goes to our heads?" "It won't," Mrs. Margaret said with certainty. "Do you know why?" "Why, Grandma?" "Because you've learned life's most important secret. You've learned that serving others is more important than being served. You've learned that giving is more important than receiving. And you've learned that true love always grows when it's shared." Richard approached and kissed Mrs. Margaret's forehead. "Thank you, Mrs. Margaret, for raising the most honest woman in the world, and for teaching us the true meaning of family. I'm the one who's grateful, my son, for giving my daughter and granddaughter a life I could never have given them, and for giving me two wonderful grandsons," she looked at Tyler affectionately, "who chose to be part of our family." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Richard and Sarah stayed on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Sar, can I ask you something?" "Always, my love." "If you could go back to that first day, knowing everything we know now, would you do anything differently?" Sarah thought for a long moment. "You know what I'd do differently?" "What?" "I'd stop at the door of your office and say, 'Mr. Thompson, this safe is open. Would you like me to close it?'" Richard laughed. "Why?" "Because then we could have started our story with dialogue instead of a test, with trust instead of doubt. But if we'd started that way, maybe our story wouldn't be so special. Or maybe it would have been even more special," Sarah said, "because it would have been a story that began with mutual respect from the very first moment." Richard hugged his wife. "You're right, but you know what? I don't regret a thing. Because if it hadn't happened exactly the way it did, maybe I would have never learned the most important lesson of my life." "What lesson?" "That trust isn't something you test. Trust is something you build. Day after day, decision after decision, gesture after gesture." Sarah rested her head on her husband's shoulder. "And that true love has no vault that can contain it, nor any test that can measure it," Richard added. They sat in silence for a few minutes, savoring the peace of the night and the certainty that they had found something far more precious than any treasure. They had found each other. "Richard," Sarah finally said. "Yes? Thank you for leaving that vault open." "Why?" "Because if you hadn't, maybe I would have never had the chance to show who I really was, and you would have never had the chance to discover who you could truly be." Richard kissed the top of his wife's head. "Thank you for closing it, sir. For closing the vault and opening my heart. Forever. Forever." The end. Tell us what you thought of the Thompson family's story and where you're watching from. Do you believe Richard did the right thing by testing Sarah at first? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.